Hey guys, it feels so weird to be sitting here and filming right now. I don't know the last time I have done this. It's felt like, I don't even know. So today, the girls are with Andrew's mom for a few hours. Owen is taking a nap right now. He's been asleep for like 45 minutes, so we'll see how much longer he sleeps. But I wanted to make a video all on the recovery process after having a C-section. I want to talk about both of my experiences with having two different C-sections and how they have been different from each other. And I just want to share everything that nobody tells you. Especially with the girls, if you guys are new, I have twin girls who are 2.5. So I had a C-section with them, and then I just had to have a C-section with my son. But nobody really prepares you if you have to have a C-section. There's so many classes on giving birth and having a vaginal birth and all of this. And when I had my first C-section, I felt very alone the whole process after having them. Nobody tells you any of this. So I just wanted to do this video for those of you guys who maybe just had a C-section, maybe you might have to have a C-section, or even if you have no idea, there is a chance that you could have a C-section. So I think it's just kind of nice to be prepared. And it will be probably TMI, but that is the stuff that I wish I would have known, all of that stuff. So today I am exactly 3 weeks postpartum, and the fact that I have curls in my hair and makeup on says a lot. So let's recap the twins and then Owen. So with them, I was induced at 36 weeks, and I tried to have them vaginally, but looking back now, it's obviously they were not ready to come out because I was a month early. So when I was induced, they tried whatever they insert in you to soften your cervix. That didn't really do anything. I was on Pitocin, and they had to keep raising the Pitocin and dropping it down and raising it again to kind of trick my body into thinking I'm going into labor. Nothing was happening. I was not progressing. I was on Pitocin for about, or not on Pitocin exactly, but I was being induced. It had been 48 hours at the time, and I had gotten to a 3, and that was being generous, he said. So at that point, it was so miserable, because when you're on Pitocin, your contractions are very, very strong, because it is your body, it's not your body's natural contractions happening, it's forcing your body to have contractions. So it was a really brutal process, but we just came to the decision that we needed to have a C-section. It was not an emergency C-section, it was an elective C-section, because nothing was happening. So they wheeled me in, I had my C-section, and the recovery for them was really, really hard on me, mainly because I just had no idea what to expect. Let me talk about Owen's C-section, and then we'll kind of talk about the differences and what was same. So this time around, I was late. I was 41 weeks, and I was also induced because I was so late. So when I was induced this time, I went in the morning, and they started me on Pitocin right away, and I started having contractions very soon after that. My contractions felt a lot different this time than they did with the girls. With the girls, it was a pain that was you couldn't ride through it. It was it was a very, very intense feeling. This time around, the contractions were super intense, but they would taper down like a normal contraction typically should. They say it's almost like a wave, it gets to the peak, and then you can kind of feel it slowing down. So I was progressing very quickly. I think I got an epidural when I think it was before I had gotten to a 7, I think. And then by the end of the night, I was to a 10, which was so excited. My water had broken on its own. They were able to stop the Pitocin because my body was having its own contractions. So everything was just happening perfectly. However, once I got to a 10, a bunch of nurses rushed in, and my doctor rushed in, and they said that the baby's heart rate was not looking good with each contraction, and also my heart rate wasn't as well. So they put the oxygen thing on me and wanted to wait to push until like the baby calmed down. So they were just watching him, monitoring him and everything. So once his heart rate looked a little more stable, we started pushing, and I pushed for an hour with him, but with each contraction, he was in distress. It was just a very stressful process because I knew that he wasn't doing well and I wasn't doing well with it. And I just wanted to get him out so bad. As a last effort, the doctor like comes close to me and he's like, we can try one more thing. And my mom said at one point, like she could see his head, but it would kind of like go back. Like he would kind of move a little forward, but then he'd go back. So as his head started getting lower, that's when he wasn't liking it. And later we did find out that there was one knot in his cord, so that could have contributed to it as well. But the doctor said we can try one more thing. We can try, it's like a vacuum type of contraption, and it attaches to the baby's head and it can like help to suction them out. And he's like, it will help 10%, but you have to do 90% of the work still. I didn't really know much about what that was, but at that point I was just wanting him to get out so badly. Like I just wanted him to be safe and healthy. Like that's all I wanted. So I was like, we are literally right here. Like I am pushing, like if this can help get him out, yes, let's do it. So he tried it 3 times, didn't work. And at that point he was like, I just think like our best option is to have a C-section at this point, and get him out. And I was like, yes, like I want to have a C-section. It was just like really, really scary. I remember looking over at Andrew and being like, I think I'm done having kids right now, because it was hard. The other thing that was hard too, it's like, you know, I was trying to have a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after a C-section. And my doctor and all the nurses there were so supportive the whole time. And like, it really looked like I was going to be able to have one. And he would just like, you could see the doctor, like he looked almost like sad for me and like disappointed. Like, I'm sorry you couldn't get the birth you wanted, but it's just not happening. And at that point I was like, it's not about that anymore. It's just about getting the baby out type of thing. So at that point it was like 9 o'clock. They started prepping the room for the surgery, and the hard part was I'm still having these contractions, but I can't push. So with each contraction, my body is like holding it in, like resisting the urge to push. And it was super, super painful. And I just kept being like, is it ready yet? Like, can they take me in? Like, what is taking so long? Finally, I get in there, and it felt like it took a long time to get him out. He was wedged in the birth canal, so they had to really like pull him out. I totally thought he was gonna have like a cone head, but he didn't at all. I remember them saying like, you're gonna feel some tugging, and they had said that about Violet when they were taking her out, because they said she was wedged in there too, but for like a different reason, more like she wasn't ready to come out, and just the positioning of how the girls were inside of me. But anyways, they get him out, they hold him up, and he is gigantic. He was 9 pounds, 15 ounces. So basically he was 10 pounds, and they were kind of like, oh, he wasn't going to come out no matter what. He was so big. And I had known he was going to be a little bit of a bigger baby because he was measuring pretty big. But at the same time, my mom, there's 4 of us, 4 kids, and one of my brothers was 10'2", the other one was 9 something, I was 8'5", and she had us all vaginally, like no issues. So I always thought the whole time like, hey, it's genetics, like I should be able to have them no matter what, no problem. But I've just realized, like, even if say your mom had normal routine births, your body is still different. So it could have been like the way my pelvis was, or who knows, he just wasn't gonna come out that way. So after he comes out safe and healthy, and I'm so happy. And then I'm thinking, okay, like this is almost done because I've been here before. I know how long it takes. It doesn't take too long once they're like ready to have the C-section, it goes pretty quickly. Your arms are strapped down and you have like all your vitals going and everything. And once everything's like ready, the process of them when they cut you to when they take out the baby and stitch you back up, it's not that long. But this time I remember after he was taken out, it was taking a long time, and I was like getting a little worried. I was like, what's going on? Owen had been weighed and measured and all that stuff, and I hear the doctor, there's two doctors actually working on it. They were talking about there was something going on with my bladder. So what happened was there was a lot of scar tissue from my previous scar, C-section scar. And so when they were removing some of the scar tissue, it had adhered to my bladder, because your bladder's right there. And so during that process of getting the scar tissue away, the bladder was nicked. After they had repaired the bladder, there was not urine going into my catheter. Like nothing was coming out. So they were kind of just waiting for pee to come out before they finished everything. And I remember just like waiting, and everybody was just kind of like waiting for something to come out. And slowly, like something kind of started out, but it was coming out, but it was not, he said it wasn't like enough for him. Eventually some pee starts coming out, but he said, I really need to monitor you. So I went into the like recovery area, and he is just, the doctor's just with me, like watching the catheter. And the catheter was like it looked like just like blood. Like it was just, so gross. I'm sorry. So he was like, you're gonna have to wear this catheter for a week because we really need everything to heal. So eventually my pee started getting clear again, and the color was changing, thank goodness, because that was really scaring me a lot. The fact that it was an emergency C-section, the fact that I had pushed before and there was complications made the whole recovery process so much more intense. A few things that were the same from my first C-section was, I remember, like, if you guys haven't had one, your arms are strapped down, and after you have it, your arms start shaking like profusely. Like you are shaking so much afterwards, it's insane. They were like, we can give you medicine to stop and help with the shaking, but at that point I felt like I had so much medicine in me that I didn't want any more medicine. So I was like, that's fine, I'll just shake, you know, I'll just deal with it. My mouth was chattering so much, like my jaw was so clenched. I remember it was like that with the girls too. I was shaking crazy for both. And then when I was in recovery, I remember getting like super cold, and with the girls, and they had put like so many blankets on me. And I think the same thing happened this time. Like all of a sudden you just get like freezing, and they're like trying to like keep you warm. I was shaking so bad this time that they couldn't even get my blood pressure because it was so intense. So they ended up having to give me something for the shaking, because she was like, I have to be able to take your vitals right now. With the girls, they had to go to the NICU for 3 hours just for surveillance, because they were born at 36 weeks. So if any baby is born before 36 weeks, they just have to be watched for 3 hours to make sure everything is fine with them. So I did get to like do skin to skin with them for just a little bit, like to meet them type of thing, but that was it. Like I didn't get to nurse them right away. They were taken kind of quickly. With Owen, they brought him to me right away. Like I got to lay with him in recovery the whole time. It was so different. I got to nurse him right away. He attached right away. So that was very different. It was really cool. Like Andrew was just holding him when I was wheeled out. So after that, after you get into your postpartum room, you have things strapped on your legs to help with blood clots, because you aren't able to get up right away. So those are on you. You just have a lot of stuff hooked up to you, and it's just very uncomfortable. You're like hot and sweaty and just really gross. And you just, I don't know, you can't move. So it's hard. I'm trying to think when I stood up for the first time, but Andrew, he's a physical therapist, so he's really good about getting me up and getting me better. So he helped me, you know, stand up and everything. And I had remembered that from when I had the girls. So that was familiar to me, just like knowing what I have to do, like what was expected. And I remember like knowing that what the pain was going to be like in my scar area and whatnot. I think it was like the second day when I was up and I was kind of walking around trying to like just feel somewhat normal. One thing that's really hard in the hospital is you can't stand up, so you can't get up to like grab your baby when they're crying in the middle of the night. So Andrew had to do a lot, and he had to do a lot with the girls. Obviously when you have twins, it's a lot more than that. This time it was easier because I could just have one and I can hold him a lot of the time. So that didn't seem as hard, but do keep in mind that when you have a C-section, you can't get up. So whoever's with you like has to really take charge, and like you can't change diapers or anything like that. So once we had left the hospital, I felt I was getting better. But what I think happened is I still had some of the meds in my body. And when I got home, it's almost like it all got out of my system and just hit me like a ton of bricks. I mentioned this in my last vlog, but it was like unbearable. And I just remember thinking like, what in the world? Like I was just bawling from the pain. And I don't remember that at all with the girls. Like it was not like that. I remember with them, it was more like hard just getting out of bed. It was just like, it was just painful moving type of thing. But this pain was different. It was just like a dull, painful ache. Like my whole stomach, not my entire back, like my left part of my back hurt so bad. Not my C-section pain hurting, like not the scar hurting, it was like my midsection hurting. I think I had pulled a muscle during the pushing. I don't know what it was, but I think it was my muscle that hurt so bad. My back hurt almost the most out of anything. And then the whole midsection, I think it was just maybe like the trauma of all the surgery, because Andrew kept telling me like, you think you're just gonna like feel better right away, but like you need to realize you had a huge surgery. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to have a feedback, was because the recovery could be so much easier. Obviously there's stuff that can happen with a vaginal birth as well, but for the majority of instances, it's a lot easier recovery wise to have vaginal birth. I do think the fact that I had a catheter really made things a lot harder and made recovery a lot slower. I had to have it for a week total. It's hard because you just are not super mobile. They did give me like the leg bag, but it's super small, so I felt like I would just use the larger bag so I wouldn't have to change it all the time. So you just have to like carry it around with you, and you have to figure out where you're sitting because it has to be at a certain level, and it's uncomfortable. So I do think once I got that out, I started feeling a lot better. And when I went to the doctor's office to get that removed, and a lot of people asked if it hurt to get removed, I didn't feel it at all. And when I was at the doctor, they were saying that I was taking my pain meds wrong. I was taking them way too spaced apart, so I was never ahead of the pain. So I just didn't know that. I was going off of like what it said in the prescription, and I wasn't told that when I left the hospital, like when to be taking my medications, which I should have been. So I just was not informed on what to do with that. So that maybe could have been avoided a little bit, but it was just like really hard. It was also just a lot, like, yes, it was physically a lot harder, but it was also a lot harder mentally for me this time. And which is kind of crazy because the first time I had twins, so it's like, even though I had 2 babies then, it felt way harder this time. And I think it's just because our girls now are older, so they actually have so many more demands now. Like I always tell people, now the baby is the super easy part, it's them that are hard, because babies sleep all the time. Like especially newborns, like they literally eat, sleep, and poop. So once they're asleep, you have time to do whatever. But this time around, when he's sleeping, they're still awake. So I still have to take care of them. So it was the trying to balance them, Owen, and myself, like myself getting better. It was just a lot going on. Luckily, my mom was in town. She extended her stay since I had a C-section. And then Andrew's mom was able to help a lot. Andrew wasn't gonna originally take off any more work after we left the hospital, but I was doing so bad that he ended up taking off that Friday to just stay with me and help out, because it was like I needed a nurse at that point. I truly thought Andrew had seen me at my worst when I had the girls, but now it's like it went to another level. I really had to take a shower at one point, and I was like, can you help me? Keep in mind I have a full-on like diaper on at this point, so he has to help me. I can't bend over, so he has to help me take my diaper off, take the pee bag, put it through the leg hole of the diaper, and then hold my pee bag as I'm in the shower. And it's just like, I remember looking at me and like, oh my gosh, have you ever been more attracted to me right now? Sorry, the air is on right now, so it might be a little loud. Let's talk about bleeding for a little bit. No matter if you have a vaginal birth or a C-section, you're gonna have a lot of bleeding. So I think no matter what, you're gonna have to have like pads and stuff on hand for that. But with the C-section, you don't realize that usually if you have a vaginal birth, everything's kind of coming out as you have the baby. But with the C-section, everything has to still come out eventually. So you have a lot more bleeding than you are typically gonna think you have. With the girls, I felt like I had a lot more bleeding in the hospital, like a lot came out then. This time I felt like I had way more bleeding at home. Like I did not have to, like I'm still wearing pads. I did not have to still wear pads at this point with them. So I've had a lot more bleeding this time. I wore, with the girls, I think I just wore like actual pads from the beginning of getting home. This time I wore the Depends for a while, like up until a few days ago. And then I just started not wearing them because I was like, I need to like graduate from my Depends and like start getting on with normal life. But they are very convenient. So I did wear those like all the time. I would make sure that you have very, very loose fitting clothes. This was super hard for me. Like, let me show you these shorts that I'm wearing right now. They have like this, I'll show you my stomach too actually. So they have, it's like a ruched thing. So it's so gentle because my whole stomach area is just so tender. Like it's very tingly still. It's just like really jiggly. Like when I lay down, it's just super jiggly. And your scar is super low. Like your scar is like right down here. But you need to have very, very loose fitting shorts because most shorts kind of hit right there and like underwear hits right there. So that's just really uncomfortable. And keep in mind, like you're not going to lose all your weight right away. So you need to have stuff that's still big. Oh, another thing to keep in mind is you will sweat a ton at night. And I've heard it's from like a bunch of different things. It could be from all the drugs coming out of your system. It can be from just your hormones. So I think no matter what type of birth you have, you still might be sweating at night. And if you're breastfeeding especially, I think that really contributes to it. So like I didn't sweat as much with the girls, but this time around, like I'll wake up and under my boobs, it's just drenched in sweat. My back is drenched in sweat. And I remember waking up the first night being like, what in the world? So that is something that's been kind of different this time. Something else that helped me was heat and ice. So I would do a heat pack on my back, and I still do that every now and then. Like when my back is starting to hurt again, I'll do my heat pack, and then I would do ice on my front side. I would do it on my scar, and I would also just put some ice just like wherever it hurt, and it felt really good. So that was something that would kind of help with the pain a little bit. Also, make sure you have nipple butter for breastfeeding. This is not related to having a C-section. But with Owen and with the girls too, he nurses a lot better than they did. It took them a long time to be able to latch, but they were again a month early. So they were just not like as developed as he is. So with him, like latch was never an issue, but he sucks so hard that and your nipples are just like not prepared for it. So my nipples would just be scabbed kind of. And like when your milk comes out, it kind of shoots like this, you know? So there was like only milk coming out of one little hole and the rest were all scabbed over. So I would start putting nipple butter on from the very beginning because you never know what's gonna happen. So for me, I was trying to like help the scabbing as it came. So I would put nipple butter on every time after I would nurse. I would put that on and it helped a lot. And now they're totally healed up, but it did take some time for that to get better. And it does hurt because they're sucking, and it's like they're sucking while you're scabbed. So just try to like get through that and then it'll get a lot better. Another thing that was way worse this time was gas pains. So we're gonna get a little TMI right now. But I remember Andrew's mom telling me, because she had 2 C-sections, she was like, have you had gas pains yet? And I was like, no, I don't know what that is because I never really experienced it with the girls. But it's because when you have a C-section, all the air is getting into your stomach and like trapped in there. So this time I had it so bad, I'd literally be laying on the bed and my stomach would start like rippling. And it's just the most intense like pain. You don't necessarily think it's gas, but it just is like this pain. And it took me so long to even be able to let out any gas. Like it took me forever. So I remember when I first like could let out some gas, it felt so good. And I was like, oh my God, yay. But it was like, it'd be painful leading up to it. And then once you let out a little gas, it would feel a lot better. Like you feel like pressure relieved. I was extremely constipated, like holy cow. I was not like this with the girls. With them, I was able to go to the bathroom in the hospital before I left. But this time, it took me days to go to the bathroom. And I was eating prunes, I was drinking prune juice, I was drinking vitamin C, a ton of water, like I was doing all of the things, stool softeners, and I finally went and it was like super, super painful. It was awful. But just realize like that might happen. You might get extremely constipated. So have like prune juice on hand. Take your stool softeners. I was not taking them frequently enough. I was taking them once a day. You're supposed to take like 3 a day. Something else that not many people talk about is the afterbirth contractions. Holy cow. With the girls, I had them. They were nowhere near how they were this time around. Apparently they get worse with every pregnancy, and it is really, really intense. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this after I've mentioned it, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody talk about this? It's your uterus contracting back to its normal size, but those contractions are so, so painful. And it's kind of like, because with each pregnancy, your uterus has to work harder to contract back. So something that did help is these little drops that I have called After Ease. I'll link them down below. There's a couple different ones on Amazon, and you put the little drops under your tongue. They don't taste good. In the beginning, I didn't think they were that bad. After a while, I was like, I can't do this anymore. But I will say that they did actually help. So if you are looking for something to help, that does help if you don't want to be taking so much like Advil and stuff. But yes, that is really, really painful, those contractions. They hurt really bad. The last thing I wrote on here, I wrote all these things down that I wanted to talk to you guys about, but the last thing on here that I wrote was hormones, and just how much more like emotional I've been this time. I cry like all the time. I can just cry so quickly. And Andrew like thinks it's so crazy because I just don't cry. Like I never cry at anything. I never cry at movies. So he's just like, this is very new. In the beginning, I was crying just because it hurt so bad. I was crying because it's just a lot. It's so much more intense when you have older kids and bring a baby into the picture, because they have their lives and they have their routine, and you have to continue their routine. Yet you have a newborn in the picture, and if you have a C-section, you're dealing with the recovery process. So it was kind of a lot of crying from like at the end of the day. And I have heard that it's more common to cry like at the end of the day postpartum, but I would cry just from being like overwhelmed, just from it being like a lot to deal with. And I think you really need to have help, because that's going to help take a lot of that pressure off of you. And ask for help too, because I think people are willing to give it to you. I would cry from just like looking at our girls and being like, oh my gosh, they're getting so big now. Like what in the world? Like just who knows? I would just cry at everything. And that's no matter if you have a C-section or vaginal birth, you're gonna have to deal with the hormones. So just keep that in mind. Know you might be an emotional wreck. But also just know that it's okay to cry too. Like I just think sometimes you just need to cry and like let it out, and know that you've been through a lot. A lot of my crying too was like just thinking about how my experience was like so nothing that I had wanted and nothing that I had planned. And I truly thought I could have a VBAC. I mean, yes, there was a part of me that was like, you know what, maybe you're gonna have a C-section again. But I was trying to stay super positive and optimistic the whole time. So I think just how everything panned out just kind of messed with me emotionally, because it was a lot to process. And I had to tell Andrew that just talking about it and just like talking about what happened is a way for me to just kind of process it and cope with how everything turned out, because it was an emotional thing for me. And I really did want to have a vaginal birth. And yes, I did push, and it was so close, and I progressed to a 10, so it was almost like I was just so close to having that. But in the end of the day, like it doesn't matter how you have your baby, as long as they're, you know, coming here safe and healthy. Like that's truly all that matters. So I don't know what it was, but maybe if you guys are trying to have a VBAC too and you're kind of feeling the same way, like you just kind of feel gypped that you didn't get to have a birth like you wanted. So I just was kind of to the point like, well, that's just my body, and that's just my story now, is like that this is just what it is, you know? So a lot of people have asked, would I have attempted a VBAC again, like knowing what I know now? 100% yes. And the reason is because you don't know what's gonna happen. And maybe I could have had him vaginally. What if he was like 2 pounds lighter, you know? maybe he would have come out so much easier and then I wouldn't have to deal with all of this, which is what I was avoiding in the first place. And yes, a scheduled C-section would probably have been a lot easier on my body than an emergency C-section, but I would always have wondered, like, what if? And like, what if I could have had him vaginally? This is gonna be a long, long video. As far as how I'm doing now, we walked around the neighborhood last night and it felt a lot better. I just, now like my pain is in my incision area, which is normal and that's what makes sense to me. Before, you know, the pain was just like all over. So the pain around like my midsection and back is so much less now, thank goodness. And I just feel the pain in my incision, like if I'm kind of overdoing it, if I'm walking too much or whatever, and I'll just sit down for a little bit. Right after I had him, I did try to take it very, very easy just since I was in so much pain. And then every day I would slowly try to do a little bit more. So I would walk around the house a little bit more and then rest. Now I'm able to like get up and down so much easier. Like I could sit on the ground. That was hard with the girls. I still can't pick them up, so that is hard. But before it was like I couldn't really bend over at all and sit down and play with them. And so like just day-to-day things were really, really hard to do. But now it's getting so much better. Every single day is better. I remember thinking like when I was laying in bed, like this is just so, so rough. And so many of you guys were like, just know like every day it will get better. And you guys were just so encouraging the whole time. And I thank you for that, because Instagram was like a way for me to cope too. Like I was able to kind of explain what happened, and I just felt like a lot of you guys were just so supportive and would send me your stories, and it was just really, really nice to have that. So what I want you guys to do at this point is leave me a comment. Let me know something, if you guys have had children, something that you didn't expect, because I think that is what people want to know and people are not talking about. I've talked a lot. I gotta move. I'm in like this super uncomfortable position. It's like, oh, one other thing I've been doing for my back is using just like a balm to help. It's like a cooling balm. One of my friends, actually, this is her company, it's called Cuccio, and it's the Yoga Muscle Fitness Balm, and it feels so nice on my back, and I'm gonna put some on right now. So that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you very soon.